She waited in the shadows of history. While others were remembered, celebrated, honored, she was nearly forgotten. A woman whose name appears only briefly in Scripture, yet whose story holds secrets that could change everything you thought you knew about faith, about second chances, about God's unexpected blessings. Who was she? A servant? A princess? A mystery wrapped in ancient silence? The Bible gives us only fragments, but those fragments, they reveal something extraordinary. This is the story of Keturah, the woman who became Abraham's second wife and the mother of nations. A story of redemption, of new beginnings, and of a love that defied expectations. Let me take you back, way back, about 3,800 years ago, to the tents of the great patriarch Abraham. But this isn't the Abraham you learned about in Sunday school. This is Abraham in his final chapter, an old man who had already lived an incredible life. He'd left everything to follow God's call. He'd become the father of Isaac, the child of promise, and just recently he had buried his beloved wife, Sarah. The woman who had walked beside him for over 100 years was gone. The Bible tells us in Genesis 23 that Sarah lived to be 127 years old, and when she died, Abraham mourned her deeply. He wept for her. He purchased a burial place, the cave of Machpelah, and laid her to rest with honor. Now, you might think this is where Abraham's story winds down, an old man grieving his wife, preparing for his own end. But God had other plans. Genesis 25:1 drops a bombshell that many people overlook. Abraham had taken another wife, whose name was Keturah. Wait, what? Another wife? At his age? The Bible tells us Abraham lived to be 175 years old. When Sarah died, he was 137. So sometime after Sarah's death, this elderly patriarch, a man well past 100 years old, married again. But who was Keturah? The mystery begins with her name itself. Keturah in Hebrew means incense or fragrance. Some scholars believe it means the perfumed one, suggesting perhaps she was a woman of refinement, of beauty, of grace. Another ancient Jewish tradition claims Keturah was actually Hagar, Abraham's earlier concubine, and the mother of Ishmael, returning under a new name. The rabbis suggested that after Sarah's death, Abraham brought Hagar back, and she was called Keturah because her deeds were as beautiful as incense. But most scholars believe Keturah was someone entirely new in Abraham's life, a fresh chapter, a new beginning. And isn't that just like God, to bring new seasons when we think our story is over? Here's what we do know for certain. Keturah was incredibly fruitful. Genesis 25 verse 2 tells us she bore Abraham 6 sons: Zimran, Jokshan, Medan, Midian, Ishbak, and Shuah. 6 sons from a man who was well over 100 years old. Let that sink in for a moment. Sarah had been barren most of her life and gave Abraham one son, Isaac, through a miracle when she was 90. But now, in his final years, Abraham fathers 6 more sons with Keturah. This wasn't just remarkable, it was supernatural. It was a testimony to God's continued blessing on Abraham's life, even in old age. The promise God made to Abraham in Genesis 17, verses 4 through 6 was coming to pass. You will be the father of many nations. I will make you very fruitful. But Keturah's sons weren't just names on a family tree. They became the fathers of entire nations and peoples. Let's look at what happened to them. Her son Midian became the father of the Midianites. Yes, those Midianites, the people who would later employ Moses when he fled from Egypt. The Midianite priest Jethro, who became Moses' in-law and advisor, was a descendant of Keturah. When Moses needed wisdom and guidance in the wilderness, it came through Keturah's lineage. Jokshan became the father of Sheba and Dedan, the Queen of Sheba, who would later visit Solomon with her wealth and wisdom. Yes, possibly a descendant of Keturah. Can you imagine? This woman, barely mentioned in Scripture, became the mother of traders, of wise men, of nations that spread across Arabia and beyond. Her children's descendants would intersect with Israel's story again and again throughout history. Now here's where Abraham's wisdom shines through. Abraham loved all his sons, but he understood something crucial about God's covenant plan. Genesis 25, verses 5 through 6 tells us, Abraham left everything he owned to Isaac. But while he was still living, he gave gifts to the sons of his concubines and sent them away from his son Isaac to the land of the east. Abraham made sure Isaac, the son of promise, received the inheritance. But he didn't send Keturah's sons away empty-handed or unloved. No, he gave them gifts, wealth, resources, provisions for their future. And he sent them eastward to establish their own destinies, their own nations. This shows us something beautiful about Abraham's character in his final years. He had learned wisdom. He had learned to balance love with purpose, generosity with clarity. He blessed all his children, but he protected God's specific plan for Isaac. And what about Keturah during all this? The Bible doesn't tell us much about her feelings, her thoughts, her daily life. But think about what her experience must have been like. She married a legend, a man who had talked with God face to face, a man who had nearly sacrificed his own son in obedience to the Lord, a man whose very name meant father of many nations. Did she know she was fulfilling prophecy with every child she bore? Did Abraham tell her stories of Sarah, of Isaac, of the covenant? Did she understand that her sons, while not inheriting the covenant promise, were still blessed, still part of God's greater plan? I believe she did. I believe Keturah understood that she was part of something bigger than herself, that her role, though different from Sarah's, was no less significant in God's eyes. Because here's the thing about God, He never wastes a life. Every person, every story, every season has purpose in His grand design. Keturah teaches us that it's never too late for new beginnings. Abraham was ancient when he married her, yet God blessed their union abundantly. How many of us think we're too old, too past our prime, too far gone for God to do something new? But look at Abraham and Keturah. New love in old age, new children when it seemed impossible, new nations born from a season that should have been just about endings. She also teaches us that our significance isn't measured by how much the Bible or the world talks about us. Keturah gets just a few verses. Sarah gets chapters. But both women were essential to God's plan. Both fulfilled their purpose. Both became mothers of nations. You don't need the spotlight to matter to God. You don't need your name in headlines to be fulfilling your divine purpose. Keturah's quiet faithfulness birthed legacies that lasted thousands of years. And consider this. Through Keturah's son Midian, God connected with Moses in the wilderness. When Moses fled Egypt and thought his life was over, who took him in? The Midianites, Keturah's descendants. Who gave him a wife? Jethro the Midianite, from Keturah's line. Who gave him counsel on leadership? Again, Jethro. God was weaving Keturah's legacy into the deliverance of Israel. The woman barely mentioned in Genesis became essential in Exodus. That's how God works. The Bible tells us in Genesis 25, 7 through 8, that Abraham lived 175 years. Then Abraham breathed his last and died at a good old age, an old man and full of years, and he was gathered to his people. His final years, shared with Keturah, were blessed years, full years, years of continued fruitfulness, continued purpose, continued joy. And when he died, the Bible tells us that both Isaac and Ishmael came together to bury him. All of Abraham's sons, from Sarah, from Hagar, from Keturah, were part of his legacy. What happened to Keturah after Abraham's death? The Bible doesn't say. She fades from the narrative as quietly as she entered it. But her children carried on. Her grandchildren multiplied. Her great-great-grandchildren became nations. Thousands of years later, we're still talking about the woman called Fragrance, still tracing her impact through history, still seeing how God used her obedience, her willingness to say yes to an unexpected calling. So what can we learn from Keturah's extraordinary story? First, God's plans for you aren't finished until He says they're finished. Not when you think you're too old, not when you faced loss, not when others have forgotten about you. If you're still breathing, God still has purpose for your life. Second, you don't have to be the main character to be essential to the story. Keturah wasn't Sarah. She wasn't trying to be. She fulfilled her role, and that was enough. Stop comparing your calling to someone else's. Your assignment is your assignment. Third, embrace the unexpected. Can you imagine if Keturah had said, "No thanks, Abraham, you're too old. This is too weird. People will talk." She would have missed her destiny. Sometimes God's greatest blessings come in packages we never expected. Fourth, your legacy isn't always immediate. Keturah didn't see Moses. She didn't see the Exodus. She didn't see how her lineage would impact Israel's history. But it did. The seeds you plant today might not bloom until generations later. Plant them anyway. Finally, God wastes nothing. Not your pain, not your waiting, not your quiet seasons, not your hidden years. Every moment is preparation. Every season has purpose. Keturah's story proves that what seems like a footnote to humans might be a headline in heaven. Maybe today you feel overlooked, forgotten, past your prime, too late for new beginnings, like your story doesn't matter because it's not dramatic enough, public enough, celebrated enough. But I'm telling you, look at Keturah. Embrace the season you're in. Say yes to the unexpected. Trust that God is writing a story with your life that will echo in eternity. Your name might be barely mentioned on earth, but it's written in the book of life, and that's the only book that ultimately matters. The woman called Fragrance made her life a sweet offering to God, and centuries later, we're still blessed by the aroma. What spoke to your heart most about Keturah's story? Drop a comment below. I read every single one, and I'd love to hear from you. If this blessed you, please give it a thumbs up and share it with someone who needs to hear that it's never too late for God to do something new. And don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss these powerful biblical stories that don't often get told. Thank you so much for watching, and remember, your story matters to God. I'll see you in the next one.